My name is Xavi Longan. I'm a program specialist with the UN SDG Action Campaign. And I have the great pleasure of introducing Rebeca Grynspan, the Secretary General for, the Ibero-American Secretary General, and Randi Davis, Director of the Gender Team at the UN Development Program. So welcome, Randi. Welcome, Rebeca. All right, so well, it's been a very intense morning here at the EDDs. Now we wanted to focus for this conversation now, particularly on the role of the private sector. So can I start with you, Rebeca? Now, what role can the private sector play in advancing gender equality? And why is that role so critical? Why is this constituency so critical?
Well, in the first place is that economic empowerment is a central piece of equality and autonomy of women. We know very well that many women enter into participating even in politics if they have economic empowerment, if they have really autonomy to take decisions and the freedom to choose. That is the whole point. And we cannot do that without the private sector. We need to do something in the market. Many times we do things before the market, after the market, and nothing happens in the market. And we need the market to behave differently. We need the market to behave differently with respect to gender, with respect to harassment, with respect to power in the workplace, with respect to equal pay, with respect to the glass ceiling. If we cannot really jump into a different way of behaving in the workplace, it will be very difficult for us to really, take the obstacles that don't allow for gender equality.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, it's, I guess a question that comes up often is, well, what's in it for me? So from the perspective of the private sector, of the corporate sector, what would be the business case for gender equality? I mean, what's in it for them? So, Randi?
Thank you. I'll just add that also I think the private sector has a huge influence, both through the internal workplace, but also their advertising, their leadership voice to change social norms in their communities. So really, it's critical that the private sector step up and do something for gender equality in their own cultural practices internally and in terms of their voice externally. I'll say that what's in it for them is actually a lot. We're seeing a huge impact when companies are more diverse. They improve innovation revenue, they improve revenue overall and productivity. We see companies with more women on boards doing better. I can actually say that of a survey of 235 European companies, we see 57% have more satisfied customers, more motivated personnel, and better brand recognition, which are all really critical to the company's bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Well, yeah, beyond the private sector, now we're looking at let's say, the global movement for gender equality, the global movement also for the Sustainable Development Goals, which of course underpin this struggle, let's say. We've seen, for instance, the impact of the Me Too movement. Now, the question is, well, what's the actual impact in terms of making progress against discrimination and harassment? I mean, is this type of movement contributing to reduce violence? Is this having a real impact? Or it's more a sort of a PR stand that helps us in some ways, but it's not getting through to the marginalized communities, to the political level, let's say also?
No, I really think that the Me Too movement has been a watershed moment. And I think that it has been very important. Now, let me just say, we are not looking for the silver bullet. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things that have to be done in many spaces to really push for gender equality. But visibility is one of them. And I think that the Me Too movement has brought to the table, especially the issue of the power relations at the workplace. The power relations with respect to men exerting power over women in the workplace. And what we want is to go to work without having to worry about abuse and harassment. We have that right. It's an issue of rights for all of us that go to a workplace, and many of the women, and we have heard their stories, had to go through hell just to be able to bring some income or to have a professional life. And that has to stop. And I think that is a matter of values, of society. And now that we know that we cannot say we don't know, so we hope that more action and a cultural change and a change in behavior will really happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This goes to the core, as you were talking about that, Rebecca. I feel it goes to the core of the Spotlight initiative, which we have discussed, and it will continue to be discussed here at the EDDs. Now, in a sense, well, going beyond the campaigning and the communications, and what's next? I mean, what's next for the movement? Where are we going from here? How we can, as society as a whole, take this to the next level and simply make it happen? We have identified all the challenges, a lot of the solutions. How do you see the future?
Well, there's a lot that needs to be done, a lot, and I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg with the Me Too campaign. I really think we're at I would agree, we're at a complete changed game where the next generation of girls is not going to accept it anymore. They're going to make their voices heard. We're going to have social media that's not going to let up. And I think that's making all workplaces stand up and put in place a change in policies, a change in practices, a change in attitudes. And this needs to permeate from companies and the household level to companies, to the legal framework, to what goes on in our political institutions. It needs to go everywhere. Spotlight is putting the spotlight on this issue and addressing some of these aspects. But really, I think it's a complement to a broader movement of a new generation that just won't be silent anymore and won't be victimized, will stand up and claim their rights. So I think we all have an important role to play at the household and societal level, but I'm sure you can add to this.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with Randi. Absolutely. But let me just, a word of caution, okay? The movement for gender equality didn't start with the Me Too. Okay? Absolutely. We are here because other women fought for us before. We can vote because there was a movement all over the world for women to vote. So it's not that we are starting here, but it is a watershed moment, as I said. You know, it's a moment where the visibility allows us, instead of taking small steps, to take a big step forward. And I think that is what is happening. It's a catalyzer of action and of consciousness. So the other thing that I want to say is that this is not an easy thing, because really gender equality affects everything we do. You know, it affects our house, it affects our where we sleep, our bed. It affects everything. And in that sense, it's also from an individual point of view, not only from a societal point of view, a huge change that makes us all trying to adapt to a new era. I feel very optimistic because I see the young people. And, you know, I'm not worried that a lot of leaders are coming up, you know, and that they feel the change, and that also the young men are thinking about this. It's confusing, probably, yes, but they are thinking about it. They are starting to talk about it between men and women too. You know, so I am sure that sooner than later we will have gender equality. Maybe we will suffer in the middle. And sometimes we see that we go backwards, or many times we do a lot of effort to stay in the same place. There are forces going in the other direction, and we have to acknowledge that. But I am convinced that we will see gender equality for the future generations, and that societies and humanity will be better.
Well, I fully agree with that. So I subscribe every single word of that. Well, you talked about youth. I think for a lot of young people, there is a question of, well, how to engage. Now, what I was wondering is whether you could share, and that's, I guess, a final question for both of you. Would you have an action that you have taken or an action that you have experienced that has contributed to the fight for gender equality and more generally to the SDGs that can be helpful for, say, a young person, a young woman, or a young man listening to us? What action would you suggest to them that they can take?
Okay, I'm going to actually say two things. I really believe that it's because of the women who have stepped forward and run for political office or gotten involved in decision making in one form or another have changed and paved the way for people to feel now that they can voice their opinions, for girls now to be speaking up. I think this has had a tremendous, perhaps sometimes not recognized enough impact. So I would really call on the next generation of girls to not take this for granted. They need to be politically active. They need to strive and seek decision-making positions. And we as people and actors in international institutions need to help open the opportunities for them to rise into those positions. So I'll say that. On an individual level, I think we need to find, to some extent, that courage to face the discrimination that we may face as women and just let it go and do what we think is the right path forward. Be brave, a little bit brave. And I really am just incredibly inspired by this generation that has come in forth. And I could talk endlessly about examples, but I want to take the opportunity to just recognize the women political actors that we have in front of us who have really paved the way for the future.
No, I think that I completely agree, Randi. And let me say, for women, we have to understand that this is not only for us. Mm-hmm. You know, society will be better if there will be more equality. Democracy will be better if there will be more equality. Our children will have a better life if there will be more equality. We have to be convinced of that because it's not only a self-serving thing, you know, and I think that that's very important to be aware of. My second point is that life is not linear. You know, when you have to go through this, and you know, many young women ask me, how did I raise a family and have a political life and had a professional life? And I tell them, you know, because I never gave up my dreams, but it was not easy. Many times I stepped back. It's not, I did choose my family for a while instead of my career, and I came back to my career. So it's not that sometimes you cannot do it all at the same time. Even if you have a society that shares the responsibilities of care and of the domestic life, you know, sometimes just the family cannot organize itself in a way that everybody will do everything at the same time. But don't let go your dreams, you know, be perseverant. There has to be effort and work and perseverance, you know, because you don't have to give up forever something. You have trade-offs, you know, sometimes you have to choose. But it's not a trade-off between life and not doing anything, you know. And I would say that to the young people. You know, don't be discouraged. Like you said, don't be discouraged by discrimination. Yeah. You will find it, you will face it, don't be discouraged. You know, you have to have more faith in your strength and, you know, pursue your dreams, really.
Extremely inspiring. Well, Rebeca Grynspan, Secretary General of the Ibero-American General Secretariat, and Randi Davis, Director of Gender Team at the UN Development Program. Thank you very much. Thanks.